Narchusco, Hialinga Shink, Luis Urrieta Ramos, Kano Kutsepo Napuchka. Good afternoon. My name is Luis Urrieta, and I'm really happy to be here as well. The project that I'm working on here is called Resurgent Indigeneity, Remaking Indigena and Community Through Education. This project is based on fieldwork that I've been conducting in central Mexico in the state of Michoacan, starting in 2006, and it includes a one-year ethnographic stay funded through Fulbright in the year 2009, 2010. And what my work is looking at is specifically looking at a local mothers movement to improve the education of their children. In this movement, the mothers petitioned the local school to improve the conditions of schooling, which included the building of a new latrine because the children did not have access to a latrine. There was also corporal punishment and other types of conditions that the mothers were reacting to. Their petitions were denied, and eventually they took over the school, only to face the retaliation of the local authorities and the community. And eventually, they petitioned local government and local nearby communities to start an indigenous bilingual school, a Purepecha Spanish school in the community. Now, I think in the process, they also had to reclaim an Indigena identity to be able to access some of those services and some of those rights that they were claiming. This is in the context of a community that saw the indigenous language lost in the last, 60, 70 years. And also the use of traditional clothing largely lost within the last 60 years as well. And so within the structures of the Mexican context, they no longer qualified as indigenous, right? And so what their movement did for them is it provided what I'm calling a third space for indigeneity, where they were able to claim an Indigena identity, but not necessarily a Purepecha identity, to be able to access the rights that they were claiming. So my work is situated broadly within several strands, but specifically the context is neoliberal globalism, specifically the incentivized agribusiness that was promoted post-NAFTA, and what that did in agricultural communities where agriculture is no longer viable, basically because it devastated indigenous subsistence agriculture, and it pushed Native communities to look for low-wage labor and also to migrate to the United States. It also is situated within the context of education, which after the Mexican government created the Secretaría de Educación Pública in 1921, immediately targeted rural communities and indigenous communities through assimilationist policies to try to incorporate these communities into the national context. And so my project asks questions around what does the resurgence of indigeneity mean in the neoliberal multiculturalist state? How do these mothers claim to Indigena, not necessarily Purepecha, challenge the state-structured notions of Indianness? And also, how do they challenge the Indian and non-Indian binary, or the non-Indian, non-Indian dichotomy, as well as challenge notions of, and question notions of indigenous authenticity, and also notions of the disappearing Indian, because in some ways they're recreating what it means to be indigenous in this context. Also, how does identity or a reclamation of identity, specifically Indigena identity in this context, enable agency for the mothers in their enduring struggle to look for options, specifically educational options for their children, in a context where agriculture is no longer viable, where low-paid wage labor is not a sustainable option, where narco trafficking and drug dealing has become more prevalent, and where migration to the United States has also become less prevalent due to the heavy militarization of the border, deaths in the desert, and also increased deportations back to the home community. And in terms of education, how does bilingual, bicultural education in the Mexican context, specifically in this community, how does Purepecha Spanish bilingual school provide for the mothers, once they were granted the school, the space of comunalidad or communality to rekindle notions of indigeneity in a context where indigeneity was becoming less and less prevalent?